I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman, and today we're talking about a topic that is honestly a little uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly important. And every time I hear this story, it's both a reminder that it's uncomfortable and important. My guest today is Mick Hall, and Mick runs one of the most sophisticated practices in the country. And what makes this conversation so powerful is not really that it's just one practice's story, it's the kind of rocks that every business owner should be willing to look under from time to time. So, in this episode, Mick gets really vulnerable and talks about dishonesty inside of his business. And it's kind of on a major scale. And he talks about what it can look like, how it can hide in places you'd never expect, and why even good businesses with smart people and strong teams are definitely not immune to this. So we get into some of the warning signs that owners should pay attention to. We talk about information silos, unusual ACH activities, strange credit card charges, refund issues, inventory loss, and all of the different ways that sometimes people can keep asking extra questions that they should have asked to prevent these kinds of situations. Now, the story that Mick tells is really heartbreaking, but it's also a massive lesson to all of us. So the episode might make you a little uneasy as you listen to it. And honestly, I kind of think it's a good thing because whether you have one location or you have 20 locations, this is a reminder that protecting your business is part of leading it. So before we get into the show, quick reminder to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows so that you never miss an episode. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. If you've got feedback, questions, or ideas for future episodes, please reach out through the Power Hour website or at eugeneshatsman.com. Thanks so much for listening. And here we go into today's episode. All right, Mick Hall, welcome to the Power Hour. Thanks so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think I just want to let the cat out of the bag from the very beginning. And I'll give people a little bit of context, which is that Mick operates one of the most sophisticated practices in the country. It's constantly on the Vision Monday 100. I don't know for how long, but probably the better part of the last couple of decades, you guys have always been on that list. It's an impressive practice. Um, and Mick is somebody who is so generous for agreeing to share his story here because, and the way I always think about it is if it happened at one of the most sophisticated practices in the country, it could be happening to you. So, Mick, let's just let the cat out of the bag. What is it?
It is we in 2024 discovered an embezzlement in our accounting department.
Yeah. And just ballpark, how bad was this?
Well, by the time the investigation was over, and that took a period of almost a year to investigate it fully, both internally and then with the charges that were brought through the U.S. Attorney's Office that include both the FBI and the IRS. The person is currently been charged with 16 different offenses with a total of $4.8 million is what was stolen.
Wow. And over what period of time did the theft happen?
Sure. So she had been here with us for about 9 years. And during the investigation, what I found was that she started stealing almost immediately. It was relatively small amounts. I think like a lot of thieves do, it's test what you can get away with. Okay, insulate yourself in the work that you do so that others can't see what you're doing. And so those things started off pretty early on in the time that she was with us, but the vast majority of it occurred in the last 2 or 3 years that she was with us.
Wow. Okay. So now that we know what we're talking about, and hopefully we've gotten everybody's attention, because the truth is, maybe it's not at that high of a number, but Mick's got a theory that we've talked about in the past about what percentage of employees may have attempted, maybe on a smaller level or even a substantial level, have attempted some sort of dishonesty, fraud, or theft with practices. So this is what we're talking about today, and it's going to make you a little bit uncomfortable. Mick, let's go to the beginning of the story. So you and I actually, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I actually talked like 2 or 3 days after it happened. And you and I were, Mick's been a client for a long time. And I think I reached out to you for one thing or another, and we were having a quick conversation. I said, Mick, is everything okay? And I remember you saying, no, It's really
Right.
not.
That's
And
correct.
I and you had very little information at the time, but you did have one piece, which is maybe take me back to that original thing that led you to discover this whole this whole that this had been going on under your nose for a long time.
Yeah, sure. So, in our practice, we have an accounting department that was filled with people that were really good employees. In fact, the employee here who is the subject of the criminal charges, again, had been with us for years. I would have told you she was one of our most trusted employees. Somebody who
Mhm.
had a lot of private information about the company and about those of us in charge, which is very typical, of course, for a family-owned business, which we are. Okay, so even though we're a large practice, we have 22 locations. We're a family-owned uh, company that is run as a family-owned company. Okay, um, so what had happened was on Juneteenth of 2024, I happened to have come into the office that day some folks from our accounting firm, and they were showing us some year-end documents for the previous year, and also Q1 documents. Okay, and so we were going over those, and one of the numbers that stuck out in my head when I looked at it was cash on hand. Okay. And within the framework of the documents that they were providing, um, it was something I glanced at and it didn't make sense to me because I'm in our account all the time. So years ago, we had set up some financial controls where ACHs that were to pay vendors were uploaded by this person on our accounting department, but they had to be approved by me. So I was in the account to do those things on a regular basis. And I knew, having been in the account, that cash on hand number just wasn't correct. Okay. So I said to the accountants and to the others in the room, I'm like, this doesn't look right to me. I was just in there. And they said, yeah, this came from your accounting department. And we have the records from the bank that were provided from your accounting department. So I asked to see those, which they provided. And like a lot of bank statements, there's a recapitulation page on the front, right? And so as we looked through that, the number that they had in their documents was the number that was listed. But even a quick kind of a glance at the columns, it didn't add up correctly. In fact, if you just went off of the cents line, cents column, it didn't add up correctly. And so
Mm.
I said, this doesn't look right to me. They agreed, but they had no explanation because from the look of what was provided, it appeared to be a copy of our bank statement. Okay,
Yeah,
but
so it was a bank statement with and what they had taken as the balance number, like basically what they count balance or whatever at the end of this thing. But when you started looking down the line and your accountant started looking down the line, they probably like, oh crap, like
right.
this doesn't add up.
Yeah, it just didn't add up. But because this appeared to be an original, okay, the color was correct. In other words, our bank uses a blue and a white kind of color.
Hmm.
It had all the markings on it of our regular statement, right? So I told him, I said, well, let me look into this. And I'll get back to you. So they left. At the time in that meeting, it was myself, and I mentioned we're a family-owned business. I work with my mom, and so I said to her, "Something's not right. I will investigate this." So I came back into my office with that document. I go to the website again. What's on the website is not what's on the document, and I'm allowing for a little bit of play because there were a few weeks difference in there, but it was substantially different. And so I started to grow, more and more concerned. I called the bank, actually the bank president, who's a friend of mine, um, and he answered the phone, but he reminded me that it was a bank holiday, and
Hmm.
he's like, so I can't like meet at the bank and do anything, but tomorrow I can have the executive vice president of the bank meet you, and she can kind of go over stuff with you and see if we can't figure out what's going on. So the next morning, bright and early, I met the vice president of the bank. I handed her the documents. It took her, I'm going to say 15 seconds. Okay. to look at these documents, and she looked at me and she said, "These are forged." And I said, "Well, how are they forged? They've got like your watermark on them, they've got everything." And she said something that triggered a memory for me. She said, "Somebody is using Adobe Acrobat Pro to go into your PDFs and change them." And it occurred to me. So I'm a lawyer, and I have to do continuing education every year. Well, about 3 weeks before this, I took a class on how people use uh, uh, these different programs to change both PDF documents, and then how to find them in Word as well. Okay, how to find changes that have occurred in your documents that you send to each other in Word. So I when she said that, I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. I've heard this. I know this. I took a class on this." So as she pulled up the stuff, it showed me the actual documents from the bank. Of course, they were different. Okay.
Hmm.
So she gave me a copy of the real ones. I had the other ones. I came back to my office, and I kind of sat down and I thought to myself, if I was going to try to steal money, not product, if I was going to try to steal money from a company like ours, how would I do it? The first couple of things that came to mind were ACHs, because that's how we pay most of our vendors. Okay. I would also think that forging checks would be another way of doing that, and credit cards. Those were kind of the three things that came to my mind. Okay.
Well, those are the three ways that most people pay their bills, right?
Correct. That's exactly
ACH,
right.
check, and credit card.
Correct.
I mean, I guess maybe some people do wire transfers, but not very common.
Exactly, and I think that most vendors, they accept ACH charges. That's kind of the standard, right? And it's easy to get them done, and they're fast. Um, uh, uh, they're easy to set up. Okay, and so it really made a lot of sense to me that those were the three. Well, then I'm assuming, because I'm looking at documents that I now know are forgeries. Okay, well, I'm only going to deal with what's in the bank website. I'm not going to deal with anything that was sent to me. I'm only going to deal with what the bank website says. So I went onto the bank website. The first thing I did was I looked at outbound ACHs for the last 3 or 4 years, at some time frame like that, and I wanted to see all of them. Okay, so I on their website, I printed a list. I sat down and started going over the list, and within, oh, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 minutes of going through this document, I realized that the name of our accounting manager is the name of the person who received 8 different transfers.
Mm.
Okay. Well, obviously, our accounting manager is not our vendor, and so all of these are fraud. They're all it's theft. Okay, so I had those added up to $50,000, $60,000. Okay, so that was enough for me to know she needed to leave now.
Now,
Um,
hold on. That when you found the first one, when was the first one out? When was the first one going out?
So again, I had only queried like the previous 3 years, and there were ones from earlier that same year of 2024. So
Hmm.
I knew there were probably ones, if I had opened the query going back further. And what it appeared to be, these were like 8 different times she had ACH money to credit cards that were in the names of her and her husband. Okay.
Mm.
So I knew that she was stealing now. And I also realized at the time this is likely the tip of the iceberg. Okay. Because it was very easy to find these. So I gotta find them now and keep going. But I wanted her out of the building. Okay. So I had her and our HR director, myself, my mom, brought her into into a conference room. I started by showing her the list of the things that I found on the ACHs. At first, she tried to say they were just mistakes. That obviously made no sense. Then I showed her side by side the documents that were given to me from the bank and the ones that she had provided to the accounting firm, just for that couple of month period of time. And then she knew that I knew. And I said, "These documents here are forgeries, aren't they?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "It's because you created them to hide what you were doing." And she said, "Yes." And so then she made a couple of other comments, and I told her, don't speak anymore. You're obviously you're terminated. We're going to walk you out of the building. The FBI will reach out to you at some point and question you. And so that day, the 25th of June of 2024, then she was walked out of the building, and I started my internal investigation to try to figure out the amount due.
God, this whole story just sends, like as a sitting here on this podcast with you as a fellow business owner, this whole story, first of all, like I just feel for you. Second of all, I got goosebumps thinking like, man, any business owner can be in this same situation. This is one of your most trusted employees that have worked for you for almost a decade. And you looked a little bit under the hood. And one and we'll talk about some of the signs of how people can find this, but the interesting thing, I guess, it seems like your first call or your first thing was like, okay, I have enough information to know who's doing this. Once I know who's doing this, I need them out. Now, did you call the police or anything beforehand, or?
No, so it was literally within moments of her walking out the building. As a lawyer, I knew that this was going to be a federal case, not a state case. But the way that the feds get those cases is through a handoff from the local law enforcement to the FBI. So I called the local police department. They did send out an officer right away who took an initial report, and then he indicated, he's like, this is federal, and I'm like, yeah, of course I do. And so he's like, the FBI will be reaching out to you, which I knew would take just a matter of a day, maybe or so, before the FBI got involved. Um, and so it was reported right away. I wanted her out of the building because I think when people start to, when a thief is in a situation where they think they're about to get caught, there's all kinds of things that they can do to obfuscate what they were doing even more than they were obfuscating it before.
Mhm.
And so they're going to try to poison pill things, right? I needed her to literally walk out the door. We shut off access to everything, so that I knew that at least now I could kind of begin that. There were really three different levels of investigation. One was mine, one was through a forensic accounting firm, and then the third was through the federal government, through the FBI and the IRS. And so I knew I needed to get mine done so that I would have a basis of knowledge to provide direction to the other two entities that were going to do their investigation.
Mhm. That makes sense. So, and you're saying she just kind of fessed up and admitted it while you guys were
She
sitting there?
admitted part of it, right? And she made a comment which was, I didn't understand at the time. She said something about, I know that the issue in Europe was a problem and I should have done something about it. And I had no idea at the time what that meant. Okay. Later on, all that aligned with things that I saw, but at least initially at that point, all I was thinking was this is going to be finding some ACHs. This is going to be finding some checks, and things like that. I didn't spill over until the others until I was further along in my internal investigation.
Okay, so and we'll come back to the Europe comment in a little bit, but let's talk about like what happened next. So she's out of your building, you talk to the cops, and now what happens?
So, and obviously, what the police want to know is what evidence do you have today, right? Well, at the time, all I had was these ACHs for 3 years to her and her husband's account. That's all I had. And so I told him I am shifting my attention away from every other piece of business that I do to investigate this internally myself. I didn't want any other employees to know, like anybody else in the accounting department. I needed to do this, and I wanted to do it personally. I didn't want
Because at
anybody
this
else.
point, you don't even know who else is involved.
Correct. That's exactly right. I don't know who else is involved, and I wanted to again narrowly shrink that group of folks who would have any knowledge about anything, right? Um, so I started with the idea of let's try to get as much information on these ACHs as I could, right? Um, as I continued to put together information about the ACHs, really all I had initially were the ones that went directly to her. Those are the ones that made sense, right? Um, then I decided I wanted to look at every check that we had written going back for 10 years. Okay. So with the assistance of with our bank, I was able to get the online pictures of all of those checks. Well, for here at Bard, there were only three ways that you could get a check out. One of them was either I signed it. My mom continued to sign up to a point a few years ago, and then we had one signature stamp, but it was only for refund checks. Like if we need to refund something to a patient, we had a stamp for that in her name. So I started going through all the checks.
In
Um,
your mom's name or in the manager's name?
in my mom's name. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those were really the only three. And then again, the stamp was for a very limited purpose. You would only see it on checks that were from a refund account, a very specific account. So I started going through them. And what I found is my signature is too complex for people to kind of mess with. You would never get close to my signature. Okay. My mom's signature is a very, what I would call just a very common female signature, if you could say that. You know what I mean? Very, very nice looking, you know what I mean? Not scratches like most guys are. Um, so what I found were there were a number of checks that were forged. Okay. And there were a number of checks that got stamped that should never have been stamped. They were not refund checks. The interesting part was none of these checks were to her. And in fact, none of them were suspicious. They all were checks to vendors. Okay.
Mm,
Well, then as time went on, and I'm sitting on these checks and they're obvious forgeries. Why would she write a check, and, sign the check from one, from using a stamper with my mom's signature when we're paying this vendor through ACH? Well, then it kind of reignited the look at ACHs. There's a reason why she didn't want this ACH or this vendor to be paid by ACH this time. Okay, so what was that? And I stumbled upon that a little bit later. Okay, um, so at this point, I'm pretty deep into it, so I know by the end of the day, that first day, I've got the ACHs and I've got the checks. Starting the next day, I began to download from the credit card companies all of the statements for credit cards going back for, 10 years. Okay. And that's when the world imploded for me because what I found was this person, or the accounting manager, had access to all of the credit card numbers for all of the different employees who had credit cards, and she was also the person that would reconcile the bills when they came in. Okay, um, and what I found was these charges that were being made on credit cards to fic- the biggest group of them to a fictitious company. The fictitious company was her own home business. Okay.
wow.
So it had her name in the name of the business. And so what she would do is whenever she wanted cash, she would charge one of the credit cards, um, and it would come in through PayPal or one of the other, online type of vendors for to receive payments, come in directly to her, and then she would book that expense against the vendor. And so if we purchased a piece of equipment for $75,000, that $75,000 piece of equipment became $250,000, and then she had wiggle room then to assign all of these different charges until it added up to the amount that we had allegedly charged to this vendor. So
Oh,
it
wow.
it it in the end, it completely disrupted all of the vendor accounting because she was adding things in that were just simply fraud. Okay, it was credit card fraud at its ultimate level. And then the biggest thing that I found, and this was the most shocking thing that I found, she had used one of the credit cards on a online Hong Kong gambling site. Okay, and they were charging this card up to 300 times a day.
Wow.
Um, as that balance would grow higher and higher, the only way for her not to get caught the only way for her to avoid coming to me and saying, I got a problem with this credit card, let's go online and cancel it, because she didn't have the authority to do that, was to simply pay it. Okay. And then this is where the kind of the twist and turn of our situation, and one of the things that I've kind of warned other business owners about now is the difference between an ACH push and an ACH pull. Okay. And so let me explain that. If you want to send money directly from your account to a vendor, that is an ACH push. And when you set that up through your bank, they will put together some financial controls. Maybe one person can initiate it, but it takes a person of higher authority to say it's approved. Okay. And then you have your internal way of what documentation you look at before you approve it. All right. Um, so that's an ACH push. An ACH pull is when you're on a website and it says, I want to pay my bill. And you log in and say, here's my routing number and my account number.
Hmm.
And you click a button and it pulls the money out of your account. Okay. Well, there are all of those rules that you set up for your bank for an ACH push do not apply to a pull.
Right.
And so, for example, she would go onto these credit cards and make these payments to the credit cards for this growing balance on the one that had the gambling on it. Um, and I had no idea because there was no way to look at that. And then the one way you would find it would be to look at your bank statement, but then she was taking the bank statements and altering the bank statements. And those
Hmm.
bank statements ultimately were the ones that were provided to the accounting firm. And so again, the level of sophistication of thought of that is significant, right? For a hometown thief, it's a pretty significant way of figuring that out. So to me, that was one of the key things here was um, the disruption to the process
Well,
of, let's pay all of our bills through an ACH push. I guess I really never thought about it. And frankly, I don't think a lot of business owners do think about an ACH pull. And I would caution everyone, regardless of the size of your business, to investigate the pull, because that is in fact, it was the way that most of the money made its way out of our company. And then she was able to use these tools to alter documents so that she couldn't get caught.
well, and the thing about that pull, is that all they really need to initiate a pull is a copy of your check or your literally just your account number,
That's
because
it.
anybody can go look up your ACH or the routing number by like googling your bank or
Yep.
something. So the reality is all they need is an account number, and this is I've read about this level of fraud as well, and we were a victim to it, not at nearly as high of a level as you, but there were a couple times where we identified by looking at our bank statements and our business, like, oh man, we really don't recognize what that is.
Right. Right.
And it's kind of like what you said, it gets progressively worse. One day it's like $171, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not that seems like it belongs there. I don't know what that is. But then next day it's like, or 3 days later, it's a slightly different version of the same vendor, and it's like $1,662.27, and you're like, okay, yeah, like I don't know, like that I don't know, I should probably look into that. And then like it's $30,000, and
Right.
you're like, okay, wait a second, like that's the one I'm going to notice, and I'm going to call my bank. We actually have this happen where we noticed it. I think it was after like banking hours on the next day. Like somebody was doing reconciliation, they found it, and they're like, oh my god, we got to go find it. And it was like the business, when they traced it, the business that had stolen the money was like a trailer park in Louisiana somewhere. And it was like, okay, that's not. And it looked like the name of the business looked like it was a law firm or something like that, and it was some law firm and associates, and it kind of looked like it was like, okay, well, it looks like a normal bill we would maybe pay or something. But we were lucky that I think our damages were under $5,000 when it was all caught, said and done. But it is, this ACH pull, all they really need is an account number.
That's it.
So,
That's all
and
they
then this
needed.
and you hear about like people, mailing checks to people, and like the fraud doesn't happen when in the I guess the fraud does happen when somebody like takes the check out of the envelope and like changes the name. I've heard of that happening for sure, but like that's one way to do it. Another way is just to take a picture of the check, and now I know your account number, and now I literally can go into any website with a fictitious business and pull money out of your account, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the interesting thing is, uh, whether this lady was doing it either as a credit card charge to her own small business or the use of the ACHs, it was you could tell that she gave it some forethought. It's going to look odd if it's a particular amount of money, like 25,000 or 15,000. It was always more like $14,848.92, as if
Yeah.
it's going towards something, right?
Uh-huh.
Because that's what most people are used to seeing. So again, there was it was a fairly sophisticated way of doing it. I definitely have thoughts on whether the accounting firm should have caught it, whether should we have caught it. There you have all of the second guessing that occurs
Oh, of
afterwards,
course.
right?
Now everybody who's listening to this is going to go pull up their credit card statement and analyze every single charge. And that's actually
Absolutely.
when I heard your story, that's exactly what I did the next day. Is I pulled up and we have somebody whose job it is to go look at all of this stuff, and I was like, okay, now it's my job. I'm the business owner.
Yes.
I'm going to zoom in on this. So when we come back from break, Mick, I'm going to ask you to think about like signs that
Sure.
this might be happening in your business, signs that, there's people who are more likely than others to do it. And also like any of your other learnings, because you mentioned this ACH one, that's a good one. But this is again, it's like a bone chilling story for every business owner. And you really hope it's not happening to you. But when we come back on the Power Hour, we'll talk more about how to make sure that it isn't.
Sounds great.
Power Hour listeners, I'm here with my good friend Jamie Rosen, and if your practice is doing okay, but it still feels way harder than it should, this is for you.
Right, Eugene. So if you're busy and you're growing, but somehow everything still runs through you,
And if you're in the day-to-day minutia, and every time you think about growth, it feels like more stress, more problems, not more freedom.
and a lot of owners just assume it's normal.
And it doesn't have to be, which is why we're super excited to announce something that we're officially unveiling this March at Vision Expo. It's the Eye Care Boss System, BOSS.
So the iCare Boss stands for Business Optimization and Scalability System. So it's a system that helps you optimize and scale your practice, whether you're one location or whether you're 20 or more locations.
And we developed it after working with thousands of practices coast to coast and seeing the same gaps and the same patterns over and over again. And Jamie and I used what we saw from some of the most successful practices out there, and we also used some other business literature, but we adapted this to specifically serve the unique needs of eye care today.
Which is really important. So what we see is that many successful practices have made a ton of mistakes and kind of tripped their way to success. But this is obviously slow, super iterative, and takes a ton of work and literally years. And the system we've created helps you learn from your mistakes and really the mistakes of others, eliminating those mistakes and fast tracking your own success.
So most practices do not have a clear system for how to optimize their practice and also how to scale without the owner becoming the bottleneck, or if you keep people in your practice becoming the bottlenecks. And again, that's why we created Eye Care Boss, because it focuses on 5 important parts: people, accountability, revenue, data, and patient experience.
Yeah, and all those 5 parts working together as a system is really critical. And that's what leads to the actual optimization or constant improvement of your practice. But also, we include the tools that you'll need to support the growth, which is all part of the Eye Care Boss system.
And scalability is really growth that doesn't have to break stuff as it happens, right? So growth where practices run on structure and not just talent of a few key people is what scalability is.
We'll be walking through the system on the Vision stage at Vision Expo, offering CE and sharing tools and resources you can actually take back to your practice and use. This is not just theoretical information, it's super practical and very usable.
So if you're doing fine, but you know you're capable of much, much more, and if you want growth and also some sanity, I think.
Join us at Vision Expo March 11th through the 14th in Orlando.
And by the way, for Power Hour listeners, use a special coupon code VE26POD to register and get free entry into Vision Expo. That's VE26POD.
So go to visionexpo.com, click the register now button, and use the code VE26POD, and we'll see you there.
All right, we're back on the Power Hour. I'm here with Mick Hall, and we're just getting into the meat of this whole fraud and embezzlement story, which is, just it's so freaking scary to hear this, and I can't believe that you're telling me this story right now with with the positive attitude that you have. But this is also what I know about you as a human, is that you're inherently like a forward thinker, not a live in the past type of person. So kudos to you for making these lessons available to everybody. How often do you think this happens? Like,
So it happens a lot. So I've had an opportunity to speak not only in the optometry world, but with others now about the situation. And part of what I go back to, there was some research that was done. It was the University of Cincinnati did a study about businesses that experienced embezzlement. Okay, and what they found were 64% of small businesses had embezzlement. Only 16% of those had reported. Okay. And the most common reasons that they didn't report it, number one, the most common reason was embarrassment. Okay.
mhm,
Others were, lack of, they knew they were going to need a forensic accounting. It's very expensive. They knew they were never going to have the money to pay for it. So it was basically just, well, we'll take our loss where it is and not compound it. Okay. A fear of publicity. They were afraid that the word would get out and people wouldn't want to come to that business. And there is the last thing is there's a perception of the ineffectiveness of the judicial system, which as a lawyer makes me sad. Um, but it's true. I mean, my case, we reported this to the federal authorities in June of 24, and here we are. Now in March of 26, the case is pending, but it's not resolved. These cases take a long time to investigate, and our federal courts right now don't have enough prosecutors, and so these types of cases just move along slowly. And so I think there's reasons out there why people don't want to report this stuff. My thought when it happened was, if we can't as a community learn from each other's issues, each other's mistakes, okay, each other's heartbreaks, then we're not doing much of a service for each other, right? And so to share this, is it embarrassing? Hell yeah, it's embarrassing, right? But the fact of the matter is, I hope there's somebody out there who goes and checks that credit card, goes and looks for those ACH polls. For example, one of the things that I do now, I go online every month and look at our bank, all of the reporting that we get from the bank, and because of the number of our locations, there's a lot. But I go on and look at it. One of the things that I think you'll find too, one of the I think things that thieves do is they insulate themselves away from everybody else. They want all of the information in a small silo. Okay.
yeah, that I was going to go to that. Is how do you tell if somebody not even like is stealing from you, but has a propensity to steal? And before I ask you that question in a second, I just wanted to comment on something you said before I forget. Is that in all reality, that 16% of people who report to two-thirds of business owners that report that they've been stolen from, that's a really, really concerning metric. And at the same time, if people did a surface look, now in your case, the surface look was in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? Like when you glanced and you
Correct.
were like, oh, I found this stuff, it's in the ten. It turned out to go from tens of thousands to millions, which is just unbelievable. And also, I bet that there are people out there who are like, oh well, I caught him stealing $500. I'm just gonna let him go and whatever. But like, what you don't realize is, chances are that's the $500 you caught, not the 50,000 that you didn't.
That's exactly right. You may have seen just that one piece, and that's what led you to have somebody leave. You don't know what all the other part were, and if you don't go looking for it, you never will.
Yeah.
Um, Now I would say this: the being afraid of the cost of forensic accounting is real. Okay. The
Yeah.
forensic accounting that we had done was, the cost was substantial. Okay. It was substantial. I don't want to call it lucky because I don't think lucky is the right word. I think we had, we did have theft insurance, employee theft insurance. Okay. Which I highly recommend. I think that if for no other reason, that insurance that you have for the employee theft can help offset the cost of a forensic accounting. Okay. And so I do think that that's something that everybody needs to consider. It was only a fraction of what was stolen. Okay. But it did help offset that cost for the accounting. Now, in the prosecution of this person, can they ask for that to be added? Yes. Um, Am I going to get any money out of her? No. In the end, we know that she had a gambling problem. We now know that, right? And so it's not like this person was stealing this money, and going and buying, rental apartments. Okay. Like most people, the people steal money for a lot of reasons, but two of the biggest ones are they have a gambling problem, or they have a drug problem.
Hmm.
This particular employee had a gambling problem.
Well, and it's we'll come back to your point about the installation. Now, you said your case is still pending.
Yes.
Well, does that mean that this person is like out there in the world and free and
Very much, very much so. In fact, so one of the interesting things about her current situation, when she left here, when we fired her, she went and got a job in the accounting department of another local small business.
no way?
Okay. Oh yes, and stole money from them as well. Okay.
No way.
So the owner of that business, when the charges here became public, okay, they became public in October of last year. So no one knew for the first year plus. When the charges became public, I got a phone call from another local business owner, and he come to find out had some friends. We had shared friends. Got my number, called me, and he said, "I'm her boss." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah, she works in my accounting department. What should I go look for?" And that was I was like, "Listen, kind of along these same lines. Hey, if you read the criminal complaint, it talks about ACHs, checks, and credit cards." And he's like, "Okay, that was it." Well, come to find out later that day, when once he saw it in the local newspaper, another employee walked through their accounting department and was showing everyone a link on their cell phone to the story. They showed it to her. She got up and left and never came back. And so, but in the meantime, she did it, allegedly steal from him as well. Um, and that conduct will be used in her sentencing hearing. So
Wow.
that it was enough. And come to find out, this is another little lesson that we learned. She had a prior conviction for embezzlement. Okay. So then
Before
everybody's
she worked for you?
before she worked for us. Okay.
Oh my god.
And so people are like, well, how didn't you know that? Like a lot of companies, our onboarding documentation asks for your name and your maiden name. Okay. Well, she had been married once before. And so the conviction was not under her married name. It was not under her um, maiden name. It was under this third name. All right.
Mm.
So we had no way of knowing about it until everything became public. Then somebody who read it said, "Hey, wait a minute. I think she got arrested for this in this other county, years and years ago, but that was with her first name." And it all came out that in fact that she had stolen from a local governmental unit, and it wasn't. It was I forget the exact amount, $8,000 or $10,000, but she'd been prosecuted and sent to jail for it, and we had
Wow.
no idea because our background check didn't look for the name that it needed.
Wow.
And so now all of our stuff asks for every name you've ever had, but at the time it asked only for maiden name and current name.
Wow. Wow. And, and then there's probably a bunch of people who hire with a very low amount of background check and due diligence type of stuff in the first
Yes,
place.
yes, yes, 100%. That's a big thing. Um,
Yeah.
but going back to that comment I made earlier, like, so if you look back at if I make a list of all the lessons learned, okay,
Yes.
so one of them is you cannot have information siloed. You have to have information that comes to a broader group of people because then no one can hide it or change it. Okay. So, and I think this is a really, really big one. So now instead of having one person who all this information flows into in our accounting department, now it flows into the department. Everybody has access to it so they can all see what's going on. Obviously I have access to it as well. So there's no way to segregate information away from other people, and that has been one of the biggest changes that we made was, hey, listen, we're going to have some transparency in our financial department so that we look at it. No one is bigger than the financial team. The team needs the information, not an individual needs the information, and
But,
because of that,
Nick,
it makes it better.
logically, though, speaking to that, and you can maybe give me some examples of some ways that this individual was siloed. But logically speaking to that, there's sensitive information in there. There's
Sure,
your personal information
sure,
because you're the owner. Like, there's payroll information about each one of your doctors and each way, and so if you have more than one person, and and I'm thinking your practice, you got a large practice, but if I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, I got one or two locations, and my financial person is not a department, it is one person. So who else needs to be part of that? Because I don't want, every office manager knowing how much everybody else makes. I don't want,
sure.
I don't want, like, so solve that for me.
So to me, I would solve that in one of two ways. That other person either needs to be someone who's independent, like your outside accounting person, okay, or you. But in other words, you don't ever accept financial information from the staff only. You have it coming so that if it comes in, let's say your bank statement comes in from the bank every month, you are getting that email, they are getting that email, and then you can always look to make sure that everything is aligned as it's supposed to be, right? So if you need to take on, because you're a smaller business and you need to take on that responsibility, that is a responsibility you need to take on because there has to be somebody else who can listen and see that. So,
Well, and third party bookkeepers aren't that expensive either.
no,
There are lots of services that'll offer a small amount of book, or for a small fee will offer a variety of bookkeeping services that are, it's a couple $100 a month, but it's another third party. And so if you've got some things going on inside your business that somebody doesn't want somebody else to figure out, that may be an easy litmus test as to say, hey, we got a third party bookkeeper that now has to be part of everything.
right. And so in situations like, credit card statements and vendor statements, anything to deal with your bank account, just so that the originals are the things that are making their way to that group of people, even if the group is two, you and somebody else, so that no one can take data and manipulate it so
Mm.
that what you're getting from them is work product as opposed to the actual document.
Hmm.
I think
Makes sense. So,
that to me is
so
the
that
biggest thing.
silo of responsibility, the kind of the expansion of the group makes good sense. Are there any other signs that somebody is inappropriately positioned to kind of? I'm not even saying they're stealing from you. I'm saying they're positioned to steal from you.
So here's one of the problems I think. We have all heard of gap principles, right? Your generally accepted accounting principles. Gap principles are great when you have a department, okay? And that's why we kind of shifted away from the way that we were doing things before and now treat it more as a team. If your accounting department is a person or two, it's harder. Should you have the same person handling vendor bills and paying bills? No, but in smaller companies, you do. That is just the way of things because you haven't expanded big enough to need any more people, right? So to me, the salve for that wound is transparency. And so again, as long as the principal has access to all of the data so that you can make sure, hey, my folks did this. I've seen all the credit card bills. They're all correct. I've seen my bank statement. I know that the right people are getting paid. And they're just handling their filings and the filings with the state for your employee withholdings and your state taxes and stuff like that. That's all great. As long as you know the data that they're using is accurate and you have the ability to see the reports coming back from your bank, your credit cards and whatever, I think that's a better position to be in if you have a smaller business than to allow somebody to just tell you everything's fine. And now you got to believe them because,
Yeah.
and I will tell you, there are myriad stories about people out there who had family members who were the ones that were handling their accounting. Okay. And those family members were the ones that ended up stealing from them.
Mm,
And so when you think about that, and you may have heard of some of these, like um, the singer Billy Joel, his brother stole $70 million from him.
wow.
Right, his brother did that to him. Dane Cook, same thing. His brother stole like $12 million from him. And those are family members. Uh,
Makes me happy I don't have a brother,
well, there you go. Or
or I don't work with my brother.
the singer Leanne Rhymes, the country singer Leanne Rhymes, her parents stole millions of dollars from
No way.
her. Okay, so again, it's when you can look at the documents yourself and go something's wrong. Okay, do that. I think another option, but again, this is an option typically for larger companies, is to have an independent audit done every year.
Mm,
I mean, if you have an independent audit done, you're not going to be able to overcome that. Those people get so deep into the weeds. And since we went through the forensic audit, I can tell you that they look at everything. And I will tell you, there were charges that were made on our credit cards that were absolutely outrageous. This lady, for example, about 3 months before I figured out what she was doing, her mother passed away. Okay, so I used my company credit card and sent flowers to her mother's funeral. Okay, what I didn't know was she had already used my credit card to pay for the funeral.
oh, jeez.
Okay. So literally paid for the funeral. And again, all these other charges where she was ordering clothing or food or vacations. She took her entire family on a couple of big vacations, Airbnb vacations that her family was talking about her on Facebook as if she was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It was paid for on our credit cards.
Wow.
Okay. And then again, buried in the minutia of other vendor expense, or other travel expenses, stuff like that. So, um,
So Mick, this is like, okay, so one thing is, okay, I got to look at every single charge on the credit card bill. I get it. The other part of this though is there's probably, and you've probably thought about this a lot. Before we run out of time today, I wanted to ask you, like, what are other non-obvious ways that people steal from optometry businesses? And I want to think a little bit about like inventory, because that
sure.
seems, or maybe that's more obvious or not obvious. I don't know, but like, I look at inventory. There's just hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting out in the open every single day.
Every day, every day. Well, so here's a story that goes back more than 20 years here in our practice. We had an office that had a missing deposit. Okay. One of the common ways people steal in an office, in a retail office, is a deposit that's heavy on cash will go missing for a period of time. It goes missing until your next payday. Because they're borrowing the cash that's
Mm,
in that deposit until payday, they replace it and then they go make the deposit. Okay. And so all of a sudden, it dropped behind the counter. It did all these things, but they'll find it remarkably right after a payday. Okay.
mm,
And so we had an office where they had a rather large deposit that was supposed to have been made, but it was a lot of cash. And this was again 20 some years ago, before credit cards were basically 90% of what we do now. But it was a lot of cash. Okay. So we go to the office and we say, look, listen, here's the deal. I'm going to bring in a polygraph person. Okay. We're going to polygraph everybody here. If you want to come and talk about it before the polygraph person gets here, then we're going to try to figure something out. And if you're the one who stole the money, like if you're the one who did it and you come and admit it, you're going to get fired, but we're not going to call the cops. Okay. There's one of those non-reporting situations. We did it ourselves.
Hmm.
Okay. So we get people into a room. Okay. There were 5 people who worked in the office. How many of them admitted to stealing? 5 out of 5.
No way.
5 out of 5. And the other 4 of them, it was little things. I'm sorry, I took a pair of Maui Jim sunglasses for my husband for Christmas. One of them was taking things like office supplies. But generally speaking, it was small thefts of things like Plano sunglasses, because it was the easiest thing to say walked out the door, right? So those 4 people all ended up paying back what they said that they had stolen. They were very scared, but kept their jobs. And then one of them who came in and said, "Yeah, I'm the one who took the cash, and I'm going to put it back." And she was let go and and replaced. So
Wow.
I would say this: your shrinkage number in your office is likely highly influenced by your staff. And that's unfortunate. Okay. It's unfortunate. It's the world that we live in. It's unfortunate. And again, if you told somebody that you're going to have a polygraph person show up, you may have an office that lacks staff that day, because the tempting nature of some of what you find in an optometry office is, you know, they know it. And because we all do have theft, they just kind of lump it into, well, they're never going to figure it out because we get stuff stolen all the time. Well, yeah, if you're
Yeah.
in retail, you're getting stuff stolen. There's no question about it.
Well, and it's interesting because there was another client of ours who told me a story of they figured out that somebody was processing refunds or something like that. That's another way to potentially do it.
So
Is
I had that happen as well. We had a guy who was actually a manager in one of our locations, and so when you had somebody who wanted to do a return, he would handle everything in the office so that the person did everything. The maybe he gave them a different pair of glasses, maybe whatever way he was doing it, they were satisfied when they left.
Mhm.
Okay. Then he went onto our system and said that he was making a refund to the patient. It went to his credit card, not the
Oh
credit card
wow.
of the patient. And now that is one of the things that over the years has we have been able to lock down, because now in most point of sale systems, you can lock down that returns that are done within your system must go to the same credit card. But at the time that wasn't a feature that existed in our
Or
POS.
people give cash refunds, and
Yes.
it's yeah,
Yeah, and so if you're in an office and you tell somebody, well, he came in and gave it, I gave him this cash or whatever, you really don't know, right? Unless you call the person and ask
yeah.
them. So that's why we don't allow that. We don't allow cash refunds. If you need a refund, it's got to come through the home office so that we can document it correctly.
Yeah, one of the craziest stories I've heard was somebody at a few locations, and I said, you know, one of their former employees opened a store on the other side of town, and and they actually sent the welcome wagon to
Yeah.
congratulate him, and and say like, hey, if you ever have patients on our side of town, send them over. We'll send over ours, that like just as a friendly welcome wagon. And somebody walked in to the store and was like, oh, their inventory looks remarkably similar to ours, and even includes some private label brands that we know we're the only ones who carry. So like that is a pretty high indication of the fact that that inventory investment was made by our business, not
Yep,
somebody
that's
else's.
exactly right. I definitely have heard that story, so I'm pretty familiar with that one. But I will tell you that when you think about it, there's nothing like the mind of a thief. Okay, it's just they're going to try to find a way, you know. And the what you have to do is to protect yourself as best you can. Are you If you are in business long enough, you're going to have people who steal from you. It is just a matter of fact, right? And that's disheartening. And especially when you like most business owners do, you care so much about the company because it's like one of your kids, right? And to think that somebody could harm it on purpose is abhorrent. It's going to happen, and so do whatever you can do to try to protect yourself. And like I said, I think number one, all of the major decision makers in your business have to have direct access to documentation, because at least then, and if everybody knows that, hey, look, I can go get that bank report, I can get that credit card statement. Um, at least if they know that, then if they're going to try something, man, that takes some gumption when they know that you've got the original data.
Yeah. And the thing is, and I want to say this one more time, as I said it in the beginning of the episode, as we conclude, I want to make sure people understand, like, Mick, you have a really sophisticated operation. Like, you guys have lots of locations, lots of doctors. This thing is one of the most respected practices in the entire country. I'm sure private equity would love a chance to partner with you at some point. They're probably calling you 10 times a day. But the thing is, you guys are fiercely independent, family owned business that is one of the most respected practices in the country, and extremely sophisticated in the way that you run your operation. And yet, this happened to you at such a ridiculous scale. And, I'm just so grateful that you shared the story, because I think all of us can learn from it. And, and I think anybody who listens to this episode and doesn't, feel uncomfortable is probably not listening hard enough, or maybe listening at too fast of a speed. Because, like, I know I've now heard this story from you. There was that first day that I heard the story, and you told me, kind of gave me some updates, and then, you've shared it multiple times, and every freaking time I get so angry on your behalf, and then I get so scared on my behalf. I'm like, like, as a business owner, like, how much of this is happening to me? And then start asking questions in the back of my mind, and then, oh well, it can't be me. But, like, no, I'm after we're done recording this episode, I might log into my bank account and do a little bit of research myself, just to
Well,
make sure.
I think again, part of being in a community of like optometry is we all kind of know each other, right? And we want the best for each other. And so when bad things happen, talk about it, get it out there, and let somebody else learn from the mistakes that occurred, or the bad actors, so that you know what to look for. For example, one of the things that we often do here locally, where we're at, in all the different cities that we're in central Illinois, if we have somebody who comes in, because you'll get these people who float into town, who come into your locations to steal, okay, the inventory, and they'll come in and they'll hit us. If we know we just got hit, we call everybody else in town, because they're going from place to place to place. And then the nice thing is, then if it happened at one of our competitors, they call us and they'll say,
Hmm.
hey, we just had somebody came in and stole 5 frames. Be on the lookout for, and then we'll get a description of what that person looks like, right? And I think that kind of goes hand in hand here. I'm ringing a bell for you. If it can happen to somebody as big as us, it can happen to somebody smaller. And do all you can to protect yourself.
Yeah, Mick, thank you so much. I have one last question that I'm just curious. You mentioned, as she said, I wish I would have taken care of that Europe situation, or I knew I should have taken care of that Europe situation.
Yeah,
What is that?
that was the gambling on the Hong Kong website. When she started to see the amounts that they were taking every day, what she should have done was come and told me that someone lost the card, or did something for me to contact them and stop the card from being able to be used. She didn't do that, and instead just
Mm.
paid the amounts. And then eventually she let them know, because the credit card was canceled. But that wasn't for a couple of months. And in that couple of months, there was over $1 million that got charged to that card.
Oh wow! So it wasn't even her doing the gambling. It
Well, that's
was.
part of that's part of the question that the prosecutors are looking into, is, was it her, or was their fraud done by this credit card, by, or I'm sorry, by the gambling site of stealing the credit card number, and doing that. And I will tell you, by the way, because I think a lot of folks may be asking this question: did you report the fraud to the credit card companies and get relief? The short answer to that is yes, I reported it. Not all of the credit card companies gave relief.
Mm,
One of the credit card companies said, because this is your employee, you're on the hook for it.
wow.
That is a position that we may end up litigating, to be honest, because that's not what our cards, your cardholder agreement says. And so that'll be something that might come down the line as some additional recovery from us. But yeah, the biggest amount, the credit card company that had the biggest amount on it from fraud did not give us relief.
Wow.
They
Wow.
acknowledged it was fraud, but said that because that was our employee, that was on us. And again, I asked them, hey, where in your credit card holder agreement does it say that there's an exception? They couldn't point to it. So again, that might be something that we end up having to litigate.
Yeah, Mick, I'm so grateful for you coming on the show, telling your story. There's a lot of little pieces and big ones for all of our listeners to learn from, and certainly for any business owner to learn from. Just again, super grateful for you having this kind of attitude that hey, if it happened to me, somebody might as well get something out of it, and somebody might as well learn something from it. So, just thank you for being here.
Absolutely. My pleasure.